Sculpting hands used to be really hard, painful, tiring. I hated it. But now, sculpting hands is really hard, painful, tiring, and I love it. I'm gonna try like a Spider-Man, web slinging pose. I think that'd be timely and a pretty cool one. It shouldn't be too crazy hard. But let's start here. We got our sphere. What? He's starting with a sphere? This psychopath. How could he do that? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you start with. You can start with a cube. You can start with a sphere. You can start with a plane. But yeah, I'm going to be looking at my own hand as I do this. And sculpting hands is tough because sculpting hands, it's a little bit like sculpting a face where we look at hands a lot, and if we see something off about a hand, it's really obvious. Like we're really good at seeing if stuff is off with faces, and hands are another one of those things. So what I recommend is take your time. Take your time here with sculpting your hand. I need to make that a little thicker. This is going to be the fat pad for the thumb. We're going to create some really basic, simplistic shapes here at first. And then we'll get in and start refining. But just like you would block out anything else here. So that's like what's really difficult about hands is it's really easy to notice when things are off about them. It can be really frustrating for that reason, but I like a challenge. All right, the little thumb section over here is going to be a nice, almost like wedge or triangular piece. Something like that. We'll refine it later. We just need something simple. And then for the fingers, we're just going to create some simple tubes. Let's click on append. And let's see. It doesn't really matter what shape we start with because I'm going to initialize this into a cylinder. So it'll become a cylinder no matter what. So we're just going to do that. And then the finger is roughly the length of the hand. Remember what we were talking about earlier with proportions being number 1. That's like the first thing that we need to worry about. And then we need to get into some different stuff eventually, like the planes and the musculature. How about tentacles? Ooh, tentacles would be fun. I've made some tentacles. I did, I don't know how long you guys, well, actually, I don't want to do another finger yet. I don't know how long some of you have been using ZBrush for those that do, but when VDMs were released, I created a tentacle sucker VDM that was pretty fun to make. VDMs are super cool if you guys are unfamiliar with them. I should have made this a cube and then beveled the edges because that would have been a little faster. But this is fine. I'm just going to keep that as an open shape right now. Or you know what? Actually, let's do this. Let's just... I was going to Z-model this, but I think that's a little boring. So let's just work organically. I think that's more fun, personally. Alright. Aren't these fun? Nice little fingers. Sausage fingers. Beautiful. Our hand is complete. I would love to take some photos of my hand, but I don't have time to do that. Alright, so I have a simple... I'm looking at a hand that's facing the wrong way. I was going to flip my sculpt. I wanted to find a quick hand, so I don't have to keep looking at mine and like setting my pen down or something. Alright, so I'm going to look at that for a brief moment and do some adjusting. And then I can Dynamesh these together. This is that fat pad of the thumb. We're just going to work on that. And the resolution's a little too high. And we need to start, still a little too high. Here, let me lower it with Z remesher. So your hand isn't perfectly flat when you're looking at it. It's got some curvature to it. So we need to get in some of that curvature. And then start sculpting up some of these different shapes, different sections of the hand. And then we'll start aligning the fingers here in just a moment. Let's do a quick auto groups. So what I recommend with your fingers is not actually to spend a lot of time sculpting individual fingers. I really recommend sculpting one finger and then duplicating that finger so that you don't have to sit there and sculpt a bunch of them. You know, it's kind of a waste of time when they're all relatively the same and you can kind of create a nice base. Obviously your thumb will be different because thumb, not as many joints. Technically there are, but it's kind of hidden. Okay, thicken those up. And we'll get that over there. All right. So I'll start working on a finger here in just a moment, but let me work on the hand a little more. And then for the wrist, sculpt a couple brush strokes up here real quick. For the wrist, I'll just kind of grab this section, pull down, just like that. That's fine. See how stretched it is? You can just click on Dynamesh and voila, we're all good. So now I'm just gonna go over top, fill in some of this information from the side view, get rid of any awkward thickness areas, fill in any areas that are too narrow and thin. See how thick it's getting here in the pad of the thumb? That just feels weird. So let's fix that up. And then you got some like bony landmarks here on the wrist that we're not going to worry about too much. I'm going to focus more on the hand and less on the arm. But we won't completely ignore it. And we'll get it a little more cylindrical here, giving it some of the form that we would expect to see. And let's clean up over here a little more. And if you're at this stage and you're starting to kind of work organically like I'm doing, and you're like, whoa, this is like super messy. What do I do with this? It's fine, just remesh it. Just go to Z remesher or whatever, quad retopo, doesn't matter. Whatever you're using, just remesh it. Just get something cleaner and easier to work with. All right. Let's work on that hand shape a little more. And then very soon I'm going to start getting into pose because I don't want to spend a ton of time creating a neutral hand and then, making that look really refined and then pose that hand. Because what ends up happening is you just have to re-sculpt everything twice because you're making such big changes. And we don't want to sculpt everything twice, do we? I mean, some people might. Not me. I don't. Work smarter, not harder. Especially when it comes to sculpting. All right, get some basic forms going through up here. And I'm gonna stylize a lot of these shapes as we continue forward, but I just want to get some structure down. Talking earlier about using realistic reference to create stylized forms. I think that's a really fun exercise. So heck, we're gonna do that here today. All right, so the fingers appear to be shorter from the front view as opposed to the back view because of the way that they connect here to your hand. And that angled wedge is what causes that effect. So it's kind of weird if you're referencing a hand and your fingers might look really long or really short. That's probably what's going on there. All right, and then let me grab one of the fingers. I'll just split it off as its own subtool. And then we can get in here and start working on this thing. So let me slice it up. I'm gonna create the first knuckle right about there, and then the next one right about there. So cascading down the finger, each one is about 1/3 less the length than the last. That's not super important, but it can be a good rule of thumb to kind of get you close to the general proportions of where your joints are on your finger, but it's not a huge deal. All right. So I'm gonna do a little bit of Z modeler here, just a tiny bit. I know I said we'd work organically, but for the most part, I just want to get some bevels in here, make it a little easier to work on so that when I bend these fingers, they don't look completely absurd. All right, and then from there, let me get one more edge loop up top. We're gonna start squaring out and flattening the tops of these fingers. And we're gonna keep the bottom nice and round. So this is a little fundamental called contrast. And this is a really powerful way to create visual interest in the silhouette of your shapes. So this works really great for 3D, for 2D, for just about every D. And let's make sure I'm pinching this correctly. A little hard to see with all these poly groups. So see, we're back here working organically. But now with those edge loops in the proper place, they're gonna bend a little better, okay? And now let's go through here. Let's flatten out the backside a little more. Clean up these nasty plane changes that I've created. And it's okay to keep them rough. And then for the bottom of the shape, we're keeping these rounded rhythms. So flat on top for the most part, and then rounded on the bottom. Really nice contrast of shape language. And I'm just gonna exaggerate these sharp edges. And I probably won't take time to do a fingernail. We'll see. We'll see if you guys are super interested in the fingernail. It's not too hard though. We'll look at that in a little bit. All right, and then another thing, I'm talking about, ways to make a shape not look super boring. One of those is going to be taper. We're going from one end to the other end of this finger. Let's not have it be super boring and the same width the whole way through. Let's make it go from something that's wide to something that's more narrow. That's much more visually interesting than just being parallel lines. So you can, reverse that rhythm if you want and have the fingertip be really fat and thick, which is a really cool effect. It kind of makes it look like an amphibian hand or a frog finger or something like that. It's really a common shape language that you would see there. So that's a really fun motif to go for if that's something you're interested in. We'll play with it. I might go that direction later on, but I think for now we'll keep it a little more what we might expect. And then for the knuckles for this hand, I don't know. I'll play around with it. We're going for something a little more stylized, so we'll see. I kind of like getting these sharp edge shapes here, so maybe I'll just really exaggerate that. Maybe some sharp points, something like that. I'll play with it. A lot about creating form from imagination. Obviously we're referencing a real hand, but it's not about having this perfect picture in your head of what the final result is going to look like. It's more about starting to create something, having a general idea, and then using the tools that you've built and the tools that you have in your kit to go in and make changes as you go. So very rarely do I know of any artist that has this perfect vision in their head. And they're like, that is exactly how I saw it in my head. And that's what it looks like now on the page or on the screen or whatever. It's more like, well, I knew what I wanted, but I needed to, once I got it on the page, I was able to adjust it and improve upon my original idea. And sometimes you just go in with like no idea at all. And you're like, now I'm gonna start pushing on this idea and make a line or two and see where it takes me. Okay. You can just cycle through tools with the Tartarus. I'm not familiar with that. Arrow keys work great for me though. Not that I use that very often. All right, so we'll come back to the hand in the finger in just a moment, but I want to work on the hand a little more and start thickening up this in a few particular areas. So it's a little like thin here and thicker in some areas. So let's go through that and adjust some of the shapes that we're creating. Start stylizing some of these shapes as well. So I'm gonna mark out with my pinch brush, my custom brush that I like to use, my Folly Mech, to mark out some planes. This is one of the brushes that I'm probably most known for and seen using. It's a really powerful brush that is like a pinch brush and some kind of carving in brush. It's really nice for just going through and creating your primary forms. But the brush isn't going to do it all for you, so please don't buy it expecting that to happen. Still requires a lot of practice and finesse. Too often, I feel like, in some ways, I'm like, yeah, please buy my brushes, but at the same time, I'm like, well, you can do it all with the default brushes, guys. You don't need my brushes to sculpt like I do. They'll probably help you sculpt like I do. They should, because they're the brushes that I use. But you can do it all with the default stuff. I'm a big fan of default tools. But I'm also a big fan of customizing UIs. The ZBrush UI, as we all know, is not the most helpful UI in the world. So I'm all for customizing stuff to make it easier and better for you specifically. And if another artist has something that you like, use that as a good start. And then take it from there. And keep working on it. I'm gonna look at my own hand a little more here. Kinda hard to look at my own hand in Sculpt with my microphone here in the way. Yo, what's up with this guy's hand that I was referencing? He had a chonky hand. Or maybe I have unchonky hands. Maybe I need more chonk. I go rock climbing a lot, so if anything, my fingers are shredded like all the time. Alright. Let's mess up this surface a little more, get a little more volume. Blend through here. This is a little off down here. There we go. And don't be afraid, if you're doing a stylistic study of something that's more realistic and you're trying to, add some style to it, don't be afraid to experiment. Play around, see what you can come up with. I'm going to now Dynamesh this and then chop off a good chunk of this. Whoops. That is not the brush that I wanted. But it'll get the job done. It'll still do it. It'll just be a little slower. Alright. Just trying to use a selection lasso, but that's okay. Alright. So I don't like the shape of my finger, so I want to stylize it a little more and play around with the shape. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna play around, see if anything cool kinda like piques my interest. I like the kind of round contrast with the sharper shapes, but instead of like more sharp, maybe we could go for more boxy, more square. I think that's a good idea. So let's try that. Let's head in that direction now. And because this is getting so stretched from my pinch brush, I will remesh this in just a moment. Yo, what's going on, Mr. Cricket? Welcome back. How are you doing? Who is Miguel O'Hara? Am I gonna regret looking up Miguel O'Hara? Okay, we're getting boxier. Boxier by the minute. We're getting more stretched by the minute, too. Let me Dynamesh that. That looks so stretched. Ah. Spoderman. Spoderman 2099. He do be ripped. He do be shredded. He'd be a fun character to sculpt. Honestly, him, is it Hobie? I think it's Hobie. Spider-Punk. He'd be cool to sculpt. He had a lot of cool shapes. We did a block out of Miles Morales in the last one of his face, kind of using that as a nice reference or starting point. You know what? What Follygon? I'm just gonna simplify the bottom of this finger, I think. Yeah, it's talking about like really chunky shapes. What if we super chunkify it, huh? Badonk. We're getting thick. Triple C thick in these fingers. Alright, let's get some more taper too. Alright, I like that basic shape. Now I'm gonna start duplicating that finger and working towards our thwip pose, Spider-Man kind of thing. Alright. So for that, I'm gonna turn on this little transparency button and start to duplicate this finger and swap its position. Duplicate that again, and we're just gonna fill in the gaps here. And this will save us a lot of time as we move forward. So we don't have to like sit here and sculpt the same thing over and over again. So I'm just scaling those down and then I'm squashing them. And that gives me a really nice base to work from. I'm not gonna like do a super detailed hand, so I'm not gonna get, one finger in this perfect shape, especially here when we're working live. A hand can take as long as a face. No joke. So I'm not gonna spend a... Oh, where'd we go? Spend a ton of time getting that absolutely perfect. Okay, and then the thumb obviously is going to have a backwards curvature, but when you're doing the Spider-Man pose, your thumb is like more bent the other way, so do something like that. And then let's delete those extra fingers we don't need. Fingers are a little long, but that's okay. We'll fix that in just a moment. And let's start working on position for the pose of the fingers and the hand. So for that, I'm going to go into Transpose Master. We did a video, or I have a video coming out on Transpose Master very soon and how you can use this tool to your advantage. I use it for a lot of different things. If you caught last week's live stream, then you already saw a little idea of what we'll be talking about. That'll be coming out very soon. Let's see. I need that to be a little longer, actually. And then I need the actual hand, this section that we got coming out there, to be a little more squashed in. And because I don't want to keep pulling my hand up, again, I'm going to find another reference to use real quick. And put that a little closer. And we'll adjust that in just a moment. All right, give me a second while I find a nice reference. Hobie? Is it Hobie? Is that how you say it? He is a homie. Homie Hobie. All right. We getting in. Spoderman time. Let me, where are we? There we go. I need to send this back because the palm of the hand is way too high of a resolution for me to manipulate. So I need to come in here, grab this, and then make sure Dynamesh that once, just get rid of any stretching, and then I'm going to Z-remesh that back down just to something easier to manipulate and work with. But so far the process that you've seen is really similar to how I would go about blocking out a character's head. We're just creating really simple shapes, simple plane changes, then we're going to take those forms and we're going to refine them and slowly build up more information. And let me merge. Merge all my fingies. And I just want to mirror this real quick. Give us some new perspective. And T-pose. All right, cool. All right, so I found a quick secondary reference, so I don't have to keep holding up my own hand here. We'll start posing this. For these two fingers, these two middle fingers, they're going to be grouped together, going up like so. And this is where hands get really confusing. Remember, because your joint for your finger is back here. So when you bend your fingers, they look a lot shorter from the front than when compared to the back side of your hand. So that's really important to kind of pay attention to. when you're starting to pose your hands, because things can get really confusing really fast when you're like, why is my finger looking so short from here and so long from this side? And it's like, well, that's because of the way that they bend. The joint is back here, more towards the, you got like these pads. The pad of your hand is where your joint is on the other side. So it's kind of tucked up underneath this piece right here. So that's where they bend from. So keep that in mind. You know what? I'll just do an auto groups. That'll be easier. All right, so let's position our thumb now, roughly where it needs to be. And I kind of like the slight backwards bend that we can get on the thumb, so I'm actually gonna do that. I think that's more of a classic look. A little hitchhiker thumb, right? Something roughly like that. And I'll probably go through and simplify a lot of angles as well. This is also something I really like to do when stylizing shapes. Find these angles where things kind of blend and work together and see how you can like simplify them in the silhouette. Like this line right here, we got a nice clean edge right there, and that would look super cool if that was kind of cleaned up a little more. Go a little shorter there. And something that I think is really cool with stylization is where we exaggerate gesture. So here with the fingers, I'm really going to exaggerate this kind of pose. Like essentially what I'm doing is like the fingers going out and traveling that direction. And because of that, I'm going to exaggerate that direction and push it further than it would normally go, and try to even give it some kind of curve, as you can see there, in that direction, to like indicate that that is where it's traveling. I think that's such a cool effect, and I think that can be a really powerful tool in your kit when stylizing. You gotta be a little careful though, because things can get noodly really, really quick and easily. So, a little bit's okay, but find that breaking point is what I like to do, and then nudge it back from there. All right. I think that's a good start. So now what I'll do is, because these two fingers in the middle are going to be basically the same, I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to do all the changes to one and then duplicate it, I should say. So let me head back. I need to get some more water here soon. Yeah, I do have tips for, sculpting faster. And my one and only tip for that is truthfully sculpt a lot. Speed is like not a skill when it comes to sculpting. Speed is a result of sculpting a lot. You will get faster naturally with time. And I would say, don't be worried about speed. It is not a race. You will get faster in time. Don't try, you can try to work fast, and I do think that, doing things like speed sculpts can improve your speed, but I don't think that speed sculpts are, and only doing speed sculpts is going to be the best thing for your artistic growth. Speed's going to come with time, so just understand that that's the case. But you can specifically work on speed. I think there's better uses of time. All right, fingers. What are we doing with the fingers? We're working on, let's grab this one. I'll use this one as my base. And so here's something really interesting about fingers. because I'm going to be bending this 90 degrees, it's going to take a really sharp bend like that. So it's probably best that I actually just chop this up and then kind of work on it that way. I'll show you what I mean here in just a moment, because it can be really frustrating trying to keep this as a singular mesh. I'll show you here in just a second. See how stretched it's getting? It's already kind of doing it, but it'll get worse as I keep going. So I recommend kind of chopping these up occasionally. And then when you bend this here, this distance is actually quite a lot shorter. You can look at your own finger. See that really tiny gap right there? Whoop. So this is another reason why we probably want to chop this up, but keep it together for now. I'll kind of fight it for a little bit. It'll be fine. Francis says he's been sculpting for about 7 years now and still feel like I could be quicker and more efficient. Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Yeah. Always room to get faster. Especially, I feel like here's something, you know, if you're watching me sculpt and you're like, whoa, he's fast. I am probably about 3 to 5 times faster sculpting when I am not talking at the same time, because I'm pausing to say things. I'm trying to talk while sculpting, and that kind of kills my brain actually. So see, I'm doing it right now. Sculpting and talking makes me a lot slower, so I'm much faster when I'm not talking. So occasionally you'll see me like actually shut up and try to sculpt. That looks pretty cool. I'm liking that direction. I think this was a good choice with this pose. And I got some of that exaggerated curvature in there. You can see that starting to happen. I can do that back here too. Just a little. You don't want to make it look broken. No brokey. No brokey fingy. I've broken almost all my fingers, by the way. Interesting tidbit about me. When I played soccer, for a long time I was I wasn't, but for a long time I was a goalie. And when I was a goalie, I would stop the ball with my hands, and the ball would break my fingers quite often. Maybe I was doing it wrong, I don't know. But I remember when I got, at one point I'd broken my wrist. I've broken the same wrist twice. And when I went to go get an x-ray on that wrist to see whether or not it was actually broken, it was. And they came back and they were like, yo, you got, like, we can see all the places where your fingers were broken and they did, like, heal back. Like, what are you doing to your fingers? I'm like, oh no. These people are going to think I'm, like, abused or something. Which I wasn't. Abused by a soccer ball, maybe. A spider sona? What is a spider sona? I don't have a spider sona because I don't know what a spider sona is. Is this like a Spider-Verse version of yourself? Is that like the idea? Because if so, that's super cool. That'd be a fun, like, that's like is that the new thing going around town? The hotness? I feel like I don't really keep up with the trends. I'm not a very trendy person. Especially when the trends involve hate, which seems to be the case a lot of time in the art community. Not a lot of the time, but some of the time. Hey, we got a finger. All right. Let's Give you a little remesh. Oh my god, that is really hard to see. I'll give that a second to calculate. Thank you. Nice shapes. Nice shapes, he says. Appreciate it. Alright, we're gonna delete this finger. Looks like we're flipping somebody the bird. The ring finger bird. Nice. Alright, let's delete that finger. Duplicate this one. Slide it on over. And these two fingers are gonna work like a single unit. A really nice bit of posing advice for hands is to use finger grouping. So a lot of the time when people draw hands, once you see this, you can't unsee it, but you'll see these three fingers grouped together. You got the thumb obviously doing its own thing, and then you have the pinky like a little bit separated. You'll see that as a really common thing. Another one is the two middle fingers, your middle and ring finger, will often be grouped together in a hand pose like this. This creates a really nice, just like organic feel for your hand. So it's not like all spidered out. It feels really nice. And once you see it, you will not unsee it in a lot of people's art. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do here. All right, let me do something real quick. Little grouping exercise. All right, we're making progress. If you didn't hear me say it earlier, hands take a while. Hands can take a long time to sculpt, but I'm trying to go quick here. And, you know, when you're working on your hands, I was talking about shape language earlier, and we duplicated the same finger as a starting point. But now that we kind of have these fingers in these different poses, we can actually change the shapes of them and, you know, make them more unique. Like, one thing that I think is really cool that you can do here with your fingers, it is a cool simplification of form, is take a shape like this that's essentially a cylinder and just really simplify that backside. And you'll see, like, here, if we just look at this one, you can kind of still see, like, the rhythm through it as it hits the knuckle. But for the most part, it's just like a simple tube, right? And it creates a really cool shape. And I'll simplify that side and make that even more simple as well. So here, I'll now look at these two fingers. What just happened? There we go. As one group or one unit as well. And I have a really great recommendation for clean form that I'm going to get into later, but just kind of simplifying, lowering your poly count is a really great way to do that, which I just did here. Just lower that. And we're just capturing that basic shape, that main primary form. And I'm just smoothing out some shapes. Really exaggerating that. I say push things, you know? Find out what works. If it's been a while since you've tried something, try it again. Maybe you just like didn't have the skill set to do exactly what you wanted last time, and now you can try again. I am always learning new things, not by watching a bunch of tutorials and stuff like that, but by just sculpting and experimenting. I don't really watch like I don't remember the last time I watched any kind of sculpting tutorial. When I was learning how to sculpt, what I actually did was I would watch traditional sculptors. Not really even tutorials. I would just kind of watch them sculpt, like really early on. And that's how like I informed a lot of my ideas and techniques. Like the way I used to make eyelids, I do this a little bit now, but the way I used to make eyelids was like a direct way that I saw someone sculpt eyelids traditionally. And I was like, oh, well, I can do that digitally. I can do that in 3D. So that's kind of where I pulled a lot of different ideas and techniques. Man, that's really cool. That's such a... Look how strong this motion is pushing forward. Like, it really feels like they're throwing their hand forward. I love that. And I feel like I can push that more. So like here, I'm gonna show you what I'm kind of seeing here mentally. So I'm looking at this finger and how it kind of flows through the hand. So I'm like following this whole curve and trying to get those two shapes to kind of talk to each other. While still kind of working on the same level here. Over to the other side. I just think that kind of stuff is super cool. This is kind of what I'm thinking about inside my head when I'm stylizing stuff. Even when you're like working from a 2D reference or something like that, there's a lot of stuff that's up for interpretation. I mentioned earlier that I have a cool collab coming up. And you know, there's some stuff that like, it's like a puzzle. There's always stuff to figure out. Even when you think that there isn't, like you think it's all spelled out for you. It's never. Who am I kidding? I never feel that way. It's more just like ignorance when I'm starting a character and I'm like, it'll probably be fine. And then I get in and I'm like, oh, this is awful. I have to solve all these problems. None of this works in 3D. I almost got like a question mark shape going on here. That's probably a little too strong. I think I'll smooth that out and remove that exaggeration. All right, but I really like that direction. I'm liking that a lot. All right, let's work on that thumb a little more. Look at this curve. We're gonna try to flow that up. Make that feel like it's kind of working together with the other shapes. I'll let that quick save actually go through. It's been a while since I've saved. And I'll give that a second to think. Remesh on our finger. Ring finger looks longer against the palm. Let's see. Ooh, you might be right. A little longer than the middle. Just bending through there. I like it. Nice job. Nice catch. So let's do a little just looking at, you know what I want to do let's do this first. T-pose. Let's grab this. Let's grab, whoops. Grab you. And all of that. Blur. Pull down. And you just try scaling this uniformly here. Like I'll just use my move brush. Let's see. Something a little more along those lines. And then another thing I want to do here, at least while I'm in T-pose, is pull that pinky a little closer. Kind of clean things up a little here. Pull them a little tighter. See if we can scale in over here. Just a little bit of squash. And I'll probably adjust that a little more later, but that's feeling better already. And offsetting that, I think, in general is a good idea, just so we're not completely uniform. We can still have a group, and we'll adjust those more later. But let's get back to our thumb for a little while. That's why I have you guys here, for when my eyes get too used to looking at things. Ooh, you know, I wanted to exaggerate that curve, but it feels a little awkward. Let me see if I can maybe add some volume on the other side to compensate. You know, I like finding these areas where I can integrate some of these curves and like blend these shapes together in a really like flowy, beautiful way. But sometimes you end up with some awkward stuff. That a little more. All right, I don't hate it. In fact, I might like it. And eventually, I'll merge a lot of this stuff and blend it together. Now, if you were creating a hand for, you know, not just a sculptural piece like I'm doing here, you definitely wouldn't want to start posing your hand. So then it's going to be stuck in that pose forever. And that's not very useful. So you just want a neutral pose. But here it's okay. And I like to keep a little extra ridge here, just so that when I go to blend those in, when I combine these pieces of geometry, it's a little easier to kind of create that actual knuckle bump that you get. And then you can carve in a little more, which I'll do a little bit right now, just give them a little extra depth. It's a little easier with a mask though. The carve-in brush that I'm using can be a little finicky around those tight areas. So exaggerate and knock back later. Much easier to do than the opposite. Knock it all back, and then you just have to resculpt stuff, and that's not fun. I don't want that. All right. Hopefully I didn't exaggerate that too much on the fingers here. We got like a little simplified, a little crazy, but I don't know. I kind of like it. It's kind of fun. And additionally, you can always change the angle, get a different perspective, flip things over. keep playing with them. Oh, and I also wanted to soften a lot of this. Some of these forms are just a little too hard. All right, let me pull these back in a little more. Do the same thing up top. And what I'm going to do here is pull these apart temporarily so that I can merge them with my hand. A little squiggly, a little scraggly. We will, I'll play with like making these a little more unique as well, because right now they're pretty similar since I duplicated them. Okay, so let me just rotate that out. Rotate that out, make sure that they're not touching. What we're looking for there. And let me merge all the other fingers together as well. And for this part of the process, we don't want any of the fingers touching. We want gaps. And we'll put them back together later after we remesh. But for now, that's what we want. So it looks a little awkward, right? But we'll fix that once we merge everything together. And then the other thing that I need to do is make sure that the palm, or the pad of the finger is not touching the palm, because it'll fuse together there. So I don't want that. All right, let me check on that. We'll do a quick Dynamesh. And let's see, palm, okay. Looks good. Awesome, okay. Everything's merged together now. So now I can start kind of cleaning up mainly transitions and continuing forward here. And this is, you know, not the most interesting part of the process, but it still needs to happen. Let's do a little cleanup here and there. Mainly using a trim brush. Fill in a lot of gaps, smooth, trim, etc. And I'll be able to do more of this after I remesh as well. And we can hide a couple pieces. Create a very simple transitionary fold here. Just holding Alt with my trim brush and pulling through there. Okay. Up here, we'll just blend most of that out. Smooth. Same thing here. Okay. Now you can use polygroups to your advantage. I strongly recommend it, but I'm not going to waste time with polygrouping stuff here today. Instead, I'm just going to remesh and project my form. And because my undo history, it's been, oh, there we go. I can control click. Never mind, we're good. We are all good. All right, let's z-remesh this and then project the form back. Hello, Q, welcome. Or Q. Give that a second to remesh. It'll take a minute. All right, make sure we don't have any holes or anything weird. Looks fine to me. Some of the polys are stretched, a little awkward, but it'll be fine. Do a quick project. Make sure nothing weird's happening. Should be good. Subdivide and project again. Double check. I'll subdivide again, but I'm not going to project this time. So just 2 projections. In this case is plenty. And now we can just blend and clean things up. So, you know, I was talking about taper earlier with my shapes. That also happens here with my edges. Notice how I'm taking hard and sharp edges, and as I pull them down and through an object, they kind of soften. So that's a fundamental that you'll see a lot with things like edge quality. So if you are someone that sketches or draws, think of like line weight, right? When you draw a line, you don't want a line that goes point A to point B all the same. You want something that starts gentle and becomes sharper and then kind of gently fades out. Same idea here with sculptural form when we're talking about different edges. Something that's sharp, that starts sharp and then kind of becomes more gentle as it goes, giving a line or an edge a really nice quality. Okay, just doing a quick selection and polygroup there. Control-Shift-S on your keyboard to grow and shrink a selection. Mainly just want some polygroups for these two so that I can put them back together. Regroup these fingers, have them act as a single unit. I like to, you know, I'm kind of thinking about these as one big shape together. All right, we'll keep working on blending just a little longer here, but for the most part, we're in a pretty good spot. And from here, you know, it would be just a lot of refinement. Continuing to push forward on this hand, making more changes, starting to sculpt our bony landmarks up here, which I'm not really going to do a lot with. I'm just going to give some simple nubbins. Very technical term, nubbins is. Something only professionals use in the industry. Alright. And a little more cleanup up here. Get rid of those beveled, sharper edges. But I'm pretty happy with that in terms of a simple and quick stylized hand. Looking at my own hand and another that was just basic. So that's pretty helpful. You know, having additional reference so you don't have to constantly look at your own hand as you go. And a little, just a few adjustments here. I'll keep fiddling with this while we maybe answer some more questions before we proceed to the next thing. Hey, you know what? Actually, here. I'll just mirror it to the other side. Let me get my subdivs back. You can't mirror when you have subdivs. And I'll do that just so I can kind of refresh my own eyes. Kind of like flipping your canvas when you're working on a 2D thing. Similar idea here. Yeah, I do actually think I got like a little too simplified on the these two fingers. That's okay. I think it's still cool. Can always add more information. I'm a big fan. You inspired me to continue learning 3D sculpting. Hey, well, welcome. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear. I'm glad that you're still pursuing sculpting. Sculpting's a lot of fun. I enjoy it a lot. And like most things in life, just give it some time and you'll get better at it. That's the cool thing about art, right? There's no like, Well, most things, actually. Cool thing about most things. You just do it a lot and you get good at it. And then the more you do it, the more fun it becomes and the more rewarding it gets. And it's a lot of fun. Right. Awesome. Well, there's our completed hand. Like I said, to do a little more on this, I'd probably need to take a quick break, give it a few minutes off screen, and then come back to it. Especially for the proportions, there's definitely a couple, things that just feel a little awkward in terms of flow right around here that I'd like to tweak. But I'll leave that for now, or maybe for another stream or video in the future. Awesome.